We just start like the first question I have is how and when did you get started in the Neo-Geo scene, and what was it about
The
the
Neo Geo.
that kind of pulled you in?
I don't know what it was about the Neo Geo that pulled me in. I was always a big arcade player, and then I saw the Neo Geo and just went from there. And I do remember though reading about it in the magazines that it was actually going to be coming to the home, and I would go and visit some friends in the shops, and every single shop that I went to said the Neo Geo was vaporware and it would never be released on a consumer level because the cost was $600 and the games were $200, tentatively planned at $200. So with that in mind, we was just like, oh shoot, it's never going to come out. And it did come out. So then it was that whole mystique, and their marketing campaign was aimed at a certain direction. Their ads were businessmen or Playboy models, fast cars, etc. And so it was a good time, and I got into it as just a fan, buying one game at a time for myself, one game, one game. One game led to buying more and more from everyone else. And I wanted to get my game for free. So I would buy 6 cartridges or 12, and my goal was to get mine for free. And then I started doing that. It turned into a business on a small scale. By the time 1996 came around, I had my partner, Chris Ray, we had formed NeoGeoFreak, and by then we were selling to all of Chicago, Detroit, Michigan, and most of the Midwest territory through mail order and just calling people up like telemarketing. And that's how we got started as a company and dealing with the Neo-Geo AS consumer line. But it was a great time back then. So many things were learned, and the video game industry was still in its infancy almost. The resurrection had just come back with the Nintendo Entertainment System and the Super Nintendo and the Sega Genesis. But it was a really, really good time, and then dealing with the Neo Geo was such a small user base that we knew everyone, and we knew who was buying it, we knew the stores, everyone knew each other by first name. And it was a really, really fun time.
What was the typical demographic of the people that you knew that were buying them?
The store owners were the ones we were really selling to, but I think they were marketed towards an older audience. Everyone that had the Neo Geo at the time were not teenagers. They weren't the 10-year-old, 12-year-old kids. They were not teenagers. Most people that had the Neo Geo were in their early to mid-20s in the beginning, and a lot of people right about the 30-year cusp. So it was geared for a professional. That was their marketing campaign. Everyone used to always ask me, because I said I'm not an SNK fan. Never been an SNK fan. I don't even like the company SNK, and I think everything they did was wrong. And that's when we came into play. And people say, how can you not be an SNK fan because you like the Neo Geo? Well, the Neo Geo happens to be made by SNK, granted. I like the Neo Geo. But some of my favorite games on the Neo Geo weren't even made by SNK. They might have been made by Face or Visco or anyone else. And they said, well, do you collect you're an SNK fan? No, I don't. I didn't buy any SNK games that were on the Nintendo. I didn't collect the SNK games on the PlayStation. I only collected Neo Geo games. Now, if they were made by SNK, fine. If they were made by anyone else, fine. I was a Neo Geo fan first and foremost, thus the name NeoGeoFreak.
Okay. I had a question.
They could have did a little bit better with their marketing.
Do you think they really needed? I mean, obviously, what do you think their goals were with the marketing? Do you think they were trying to persuade people that, or what do you think the people that really ended up buying the stuff were already convinced in the first place, type of thing?
Well, the people that were buying the Neo Geo were people that were really into the arcade experience. Mm-hmm. This was one time when still Nintendo and Genesis were doing ports, coming that close to the actual arcade, but the Neo Geo was 100% spot on. So people wanted that experience. Secondly, it was almost like buying something out of the ordinary. The same reason why someone might buy a Cadillac or a Mercedes or any other Ferrari, Tesla. Yeah, you can name a million cars. So it was kind of like, I have this. They wanted that kind of a split level. I'm a hot dog, you're a weenie. So they were trying to go for that kind of market, but I think they failed in a lot of spots. All they do is maybe present it more often, do something with it. You know, advertising does work. I mean, everyone knows who Coca-Cola is because they still advertise, even though we know what it is. McDonald's the same way. But SNK dropped the ball, and that's why they went through about 7 different crews that were running SNK, from SNK Home Entertainment to SNK America to SNK Corporation of America, SNK USA, SNK Neo-Geo USA. They were always just taking anyone in that wanted to franchise and pay the royalties back to Japan. They wanted us to take over it, and I said no, because I didn't want to market the games to the PlayStation or the Pocket, because I wasn't an expert in that field, and I didn't want to sink my money and fail on that, so I only concentrated on the consumer. And at that time, it was a perfect time, and again, like the perfect storm. The one crew, the 6th crew of SNK Corporation of America, didn't want to sell Neo-Geo consumer anymore, what they used to call ROM cartridges. So they just wanted to focus on the ports of the PlayStation, Xbox, and the Neo-Geo Pocket. And that's why during that time frame, there were so many games that were Japan only. So we came in and said, okay, fine, we'll take over and deal with all the consumer products. And they were happy, like, fine, we don't have to deal with that. We have these guys that want to do all the consumer line. So when we took over the line, I started calling it the AES. It said it right on the box, Advanced Entertainment System. So, and I remember everyone called the Nintendo the NES. So I said, you got to come up with something to make the Neo Geo stand out. So at that time I said AES. And since then it's stuck. So it's little things like that I said SNK, get it done. They could have marketed their system correctly. They just called it a ROM cartridge. Well, hell, even the Nintendo was a ROM cartridge. The Atari 2600 was a ROM cartridge. So the AES made that little bit of a difference. And as you see, 10, 12 years later, that's all people say, AES, MVS. But so we came in that perfect time when SNK was passing on all these, they didn't want to release any more games. They were done. The SNK, the branch in America that franchised the name, they didn't want to release anything. So we came in and we started offering the same games with the repackaging, what people call freaked inserts. And that's how it all started. But like I said, it was a great time to be able to get into it and do that kind of thing.
Let's take a step back, when, can you go back to maybe your thought process and when you first, even like the early days when you were just buying the games, and kind of give people a little bit of background on, even, did you, when you first started, was it just to...
It was just to get mine for free.
Yeah.
I had no way of thinking it would have gone on to...
Were you skeptical if you'd be able to resell as the extras that you...
No, I honestly, it never came up. It was just 1 became buying 2, 2 became buying 4, and it always multiplied. And then I started making the phone calls. Well, the phone calls that I made were beforehand when I tried to find the game. Where was I going to buy my cartridge? You had to go through your magazines and go, okay, this place carries Neo-Geo, this place carries Neo-Geo. So I would call them up, oh, do you have this game? No, I don't. And I'd call the other store, do you have this game? No, I don't. So when I found a place that did have the game in stock, I would buy it. So then I knew okay, this store. I had a little phone book, this store. So then I said, why don't I just start buying from SNK directly? So, but SNK wouldn't sell you, at the time, they wouldn't sell you 1 or 2 games because they weren't doing retail sales, it was only wholesale. That's when I started to have to buy 6 games at a time. When I had enough I could buy 6, you could wholesale. Because they sell them in 6-packs and 12-packs. Then I bought the 6-pack. Then I'm like, well, maybe I can buy the 12-pack and not just get my game for free, but make a little profit. That became to buying 24, buying 100. Then all the stores that I would call that didn't have the game in stock, I told them, how many do you want? And they would start buying 1 or 2 for me. Eventually that just became so much more greater that these stores were now calling me and telling me, give us 2 of these, give us 4 of these, give us 5 of these.
Because they didn't have to take the risk of buying the full 6 or whatever.
Or 12.
Yeah.
So then I could buy them from SNK and I'd had them. After that, and like I said, when SNK didn't want to do that work, because then you have to deal with this guy buying two, this guy buying two. Now S&K had a wingman. It was me, NeoGeoFreak, me and my partner Chris. They had us doing all the legwork, making the communications, keeping in touch with people. So now S&K just said, okay, you guys want how many? 500? We would order 500, and then we would sell 20 here, 20 there, 20 there, all across the United States. And at that time, when the sixth crew came in, they didn't want to do consumer. We became the exclusive distributor, so nobody else could distribute in the United States but us. And it was just perfect timing, and they couldn't have worked out any other way.
How many, about that time, was that pretty much like the peak of...
The Neo-Geo's peak would be between 96 and 98, maybe in terms of how many games were coming out. Mm-hmm. In terms of popularity, I would say between 98.
And when did you get in your full swing as a company?
96, the end of 96, 97. Okay. By the time 98, 99 came on, it was the Neo-Geo's highest peak because the way we marketed ourselves. NeoGeoFreak, we were the bad boys of the business. Everything we did, it was well orchestrated according to a specific plan. We sit and discuss, what do we do? How do we do this? What do we make to have an ongoing conversation? So we came up with the idea. We took the image of the Neo-Geo, that bigger, badder, better, and multiplied it by like 1 million. I became the public enemy number one. They were kind of the bad guy. And if you were look at it as in the wrestling industry, you had the good guys versus the bad guys. So I became this persona online by the way I would talk and do little things that some people would find hilarious, and then there was these other people that would take it personal and get angry about it. I'm like, you don't even know me. All I'm doing is writing something on the text. At that point, no one ever saw a picture of me. And they were getting personal. They, starting to say, oh, you're this or you're that. And I can take a punch as well as anyone. But the personal attacks I always felt were, why? You don't even know me to be angry enough at me to get personal.
What types of things did you do that got people worked up?
Ripped an insert. Okay. Because we created our own inserts. And we would look at this other artwork and say, this is, at this point in time, it's worthless. We're the distributor. We paid to have our artwork. We had to repackage them if they needed it. So it was something like that, and I just would say, rip an insert, shred it. And then people would just be like, oh my God, what did this guy just do? I looked at it as I did nothing. I ripped a piece of paper. I've seen people light cigarettes with $100 cigars with a $100 bill. Throw money at a party, a birthday party, just throw hundreds in the air. So you can do whatever you want to do with it. So we saw that, I'm like, okay, we're on to something.
Now in reality, am I correct that you gave customers the option if they wanted that other insert, they could still. Yeah. So it's not like you were destroying all of them or anything like that.
It was.
But you kind of.
We elevated it to a level.
Yeah, you dramatized.
The ripping turned into a shredding machine, and we had some trade shows, the Classic Gaming Expo with our good friends at Digital Press. They had us in this beautiful booth, and it became part of the persona that the customers now started requesting to do the same thing. They would buy the game, and they wanted to shred the insert themselves and then take the shreddings. They were posting pictures. So it became this whole elevated way of the NeoGeoFreak fans versus, I don't know, the NeoGeo purist or something. But, me and Chris are the biggest fans out there. There's no bigger fans than us. And it was just for fun, just a marketing gimmick. And it went on. And so that became, all of a sudden, instead of being as nice as I could be in a post, I would be a little, and I was never rude. I was never outright, never attacked anyone. I never called anyone any names. I never used profanity. But I would just talk and certainly go, look what we have. Here's what's coming out. And I would only give hints because that was a way of marketing. Like when we did
got people talking.
The King of Fighters 2000, I talked about it in hints that it was coming out. And this is what's going to happen. This is what's going to happen. And so when you start giving one hint, then they want the next hint. Then you start giving this, then they want more. Then they want the proof. And the idea is you never give them that because you don't have to. You can't. I'm not going to show legal documents. So when you don't show them, the more they demand, the more I just lay back. Because if you ask me nicely, I'll show it. When you demand, then I just play. Then I'll play along. Then it was part of the NGF, the bad boys, the bad boys. Then we don't say nothing. Then we come back. Then here it is, and it was that. And I think a lot of other people were in on the joke because there's a lot of people we talked to by telephone, and they would go along with it, and they would even be part in the play. And it was just going, and there's some people that have taken it like a religion, and I appreciate it. I appreciate that they're still talking about Chris Ray or Dion Dakis or NeoGeoFreak or NGF, whatever they want to call us. But I need to tell them they should really look at the bigger picture and kind of see what we did was all in the marketing.
Now, do you think so many years gone by, and people getting stuff secondhand, there's a lot of stuff taken out of context, or do you?
I think it could be. I think a lot of things that they read online, people make up. Like, we never landed on the moon. Lee Harvey Oswald didn't do this conspiracy theory. People online come up with these notions, and they try to form their speculations because they just don't understand what goes on in the world. And when we were doing things, like for example, when we had our agreements to reproduce our own artwork, to repackage our games. And the one reason was because they were coming from Japan. Even SNK Home Entertainment, SNK Corporation America, SNK Neo-Geo USA, they repackaged their products for the American market. And we did it, and we wanted everything to be a certain way. Puzzles had the yellow stripes, fighting red, sports green. So, and a lot of other manufacturers, distributors, put their own logos on the back so people know where to find them. When we were doing that, people said, you guys aren't, you're not an exclusive distributor. Why are you doing this? We're like, yeah, we are. Call SNK. And a lot of people did call SNK, and they said, yeah, contact NeoGeoFreak. They're the distributor. But some people that didn't want to take that step just wanted to say, you're not official. If you are, show us your paperwork. I'm not going to show anyone any paperwork. It was verified in court that we were the exclusive distributor because of Playmore and they should have with their little court that we went through. But that came clean. So then those people didn't have that. They couldn't argue that point anymore because now they knew we were official. We reached an agreement with Playmore. That was squashed. But at the time, people were like, show me proof, show me proof, show me proof. And whatever picture I would show, people would have an answer for. Like I said, NASA shows a picture of the man on the moon, the Apollo mission. Someone has a story of why the shadow is going left. So whatever we showed, it wouldn't be good enough, so we just stopped showing that kind of stuff anyway. And we just kept up with the ripping of the inserts or stuff like that, the good guy versus the bad guy, and it was fun. And now, the last time we were at a show was in 2003, I think, 2002 or 2003. People still talk about the shredding of the inserts. That's how powerful that campaign was, because we were saying, these are no good, rip them up. 10 years later, still talked about that promotion. And in terms of advertising and marketing campaign, that lasts probably longer than Coca-Cola or McDonald's or anything. That's a powerful campaign. We said the NeoGeoFreak inserts were number one. And that's all we wanted to do is have people talk about it. The day NeoGeoFreak, people learn about us, they contact us, they find out who we are.